This was my first time losing consciousness. You often hear of regaining consciousness on top of a bed, but this was my first time actually experiencing it.
もしもし大丈夫ですか
Realizing that I was awake, a young doctor called out to me. I didn't intend to respond, but it seems my body language had told him I was conscious. My head was wrapped in bandages. The scratches all over my body had also been treated. My sense of pain also returned with my consciousness, causing me to groan from the intense pain shooting all throughout me.
起きないで横になっていてください
Right, I almost forgot. The other Yakuza member that we went after fought us like it was like Rust PvP. Like the dude got a rock and he started bashing our skull with it, and he cracked our head open a little bit.
頭をだいぶ殴られたようですからね24時間は特に安静にして容体を見守りたいところです
ここは
私の診療所です入江と申しますよろしく
I remembered that this young doctor was the one in the car that headed the opposite way earlier.
誰かいませんか大石さんは
あ呼んできましょう診療所の中は禁煙なんで表で吸ってもらってるんです
Dr. Idia left the room to go call Oishi. And do remember, this is the same clinic image that they use for like the school, but this is a different clinic. This is like the actual like village clinic, the little mini hospital that we have, where in chapter 3 we came and told Idia Sensei what we did, and then the dude's like, you should be resting. And then when he leaves the room and we like try to go to the bathroom, we overhear him saying that he wants us institutionalized. The scenery outside the window was tinted with gold. The pouring rain had stopped, with the voices of the Higurashi heralding the cooling temperature. I felt that the tone of the Higurashi's voices was comforting. Eventually, I could hear heavy footsteps coming closer, which I reckoned to be Oishi's. The fog that was enveloping my head slowly faded back to reality. What had happened since then? What had happened to the boy? What about the reinforcements from Tokyo? The door to the room flew open, allowing Dr. Irie and Oishi to enter.
じゃあ命に別状はないんでしょ
ないとお約束はできません、頭に受けた傷は初見だけでは判断が危険なのです
わかりましたわかりました
Also, hey Melina, forgot to welcome you in, my bad. My mic was covering your message specifically from a bit ago.
ちょいと彼と二人で話がしたいんですがよろしいですかね
ええどうぞ何かありましたらお呼びください
Also, I believe this is a new song we haven't heard. Let me crank it up a little bit. It's a very nice piano piece. Anyway, Oishi, after basically forcing Dr. Irie outside, shut the door.
いかがですかお具合は
慣れないことをしたんで全身がボロボロです
Oishi brought over a folding chair that was leaning against the wall and sat down beside the bed.
犯人たちは逮捕されましたか
残念ながらとっくに県外へ逃げたか村人にかくまわれているかのどちらかでしょうねまあ逃がしゃしませんが
大臣の孫は
署で保護していますただ東京のあなたのご同僚から一切の聴取は取るなと釘を刺されたらしいですよしげちゃんが憤慨してましたっけ
Nothing can be recorded. I think they mean like that the police here shouldn't be making a record or like a report of like what's going on. I assume that's exactly what he means. The kidnapping was so here it is. The kidnapping was a confidential matter, so his custody was also probably being kept under wraps. How the kidnapping of the minister's grandson would be handled, how it would be covered up, treated like it never happened, would be handled by the brass. If this case ended without the nation going into an uproar about it, then our job had been done. The possibility that the minister had negotiated with the perpetrators couldn't be ruled out. But something like that was no longer my concern. My role in this case was over.
ご迷惑をおかけします。公安ってやつはいやらしいところだって思ってるでしょ。
思いません思いません。お互い日の丸から給金もらって仕事してるだけですよ。
Oishi laughed boisterously. When we first met, I was somewhat prejudiced against Oishi, but now that feeling was gone completely.
今回の事件隠さないで大事にしてくれた方がこっちは都合がいいんですけどね。そうすれば黒幕の園崎本家に少しは迫れるんですが、まあ適当に迫ったところで圧力がかかるんでしょうがね。やれやれです。
やれやれ。
大石さんは園崎本家に今後も戦いを。
まさか。いろいろと黒い噂こそ絶えませんがね。園崎家に恨みがあるわけじゃありませんので、君子危うきに近寄らない方がいいんですよ。ね。
That's really peculiar, especially considering like what happens or how Oishi is described in later games, or in the, not later games, but in the previous chapters, which are technically set in the future, right? Because this is set in like 1970 something. The games are set in the early 80s. It's kind of interesting how he's like, nah, I don't really have a grudge against them, but the way Oishi is described later on, it's usually the opposite. Oishi laughed happily, and I couldn't help but laugh long.
そうだそうだ。さっき県警から署に連絡があったそうです。あなたのご同僚が名古屋に到着したそうで、今車でこちらへ向かっているそうです。あなたは名誉の負傷ですから東京へ引き上げだそうですよ。そんなわけです。お疲れ様でした。あなたの沖宮での仕事は無事終了です。
I was being recalled to Tokyo. I inadvertently breathed a sigh of relief when I heard those words.
大石さんのご協力に深く感謝します。あなたに支払った協力金は無駄にはなりませんでしたね。
あら、冗談のつもりだったんだけどな。
Oishi took out his wallet, casually pulled out several large bills, and jammed them into my breast pocket.
これは協力金の返済じゃないですよ。私からあなたへのお小遣いです。この辺は地酒がうまいんでね。東京へのお土産にこいつで買っていくといいでしょう。
Oishi flashed me a grin.
もしもあなたの傷が軽いようなら、東京へ帰る前にぜひ声をかけてくださいよ。おやつさんも佐藤さんもぜひあなたともう一度卓を囲みたいと言ってましたからね。
やれやれ。参ったな。
今度はこっちも小細工抜きです。純粋に楽しもうじゃないですか。
No.
よく言いますよ。現職の警官があんなに濃い様ができるなんて世も末です。
私どもとね、対等以上に撃てるメンツにはなかなかお会いできないもんです。あなたが東京に帰るのが惜しいですよ。
When I heard the words going back to Tokyo from Oishi, I was reminded once again that I was relieved from my duties. Soon, Yukiya would be giving birth. It might still be possible to attend the delivery that I had one time given up on. When I thought that, the pain from my injuries became trivial. I wanted to hurry back to Tokyo and see Yukiya at once.
少し傷が重いふりをして沖宮にしばらく滞在しません？ いいお店をいろいろ紹介しますよ。もちろんおごれなんて言いません。
申し訳ないですが、それはまたの機会にします。妻の出産日が近いんでね。早く帰りたいんです。
ありゃりゃ。それは知らなかった。それじゃあこんなとこにいちゃいけない。早く帰らないといけません。
For a while after that, Oishi asked all sorts of questions about my wife, teasing and bantering with me.
さて、具合はどうです？おきれいそうですか？
ええ、おかげさまで悪くないです。立って歩いても全然平気ですよ。
I stood up and shuffled around for a bit, which seemed to amuse Oishi.
いえいえ、ひなみ沢の病院では落ち着かないでしょうと思いまして。入江の先生は一晩泊まらせたいみたいなこと言ってますが、犯人もまだ捕まってませんし、
Right.
一応ここはあなたにとっては敵地になりますからね。
この病院は安全ではない。
まあ、入江の先生も多少は社会的信用のあるお人です。
Yeah, because I was just thinking about this as well. Do remember, we are in the Hinamizawa clinic, right? Dr. Irie, he does have his responsibility as a doctor to just look after us, right? To make sure that we are not injured or whatever. But if, let's just say he puts us in a room where the windows are not locked, and I don't know, he gives us some pain medication that knocks us out, and it just so happens that in the middle of the night, a few people come in and stab us, or maybe, I don't know, tamper with our IV, and they introduce this drug that for some reason cannot be, tracked or traced, like how it happened in chapter 1, and we end up dying for some reason, then not much we can do about it, right? So it is pretty dangerous. When he said hey, you should take some of this money and go buy yourself some booze, I thought to myself, if we were to go into any fucking store or anything, if we're not escorted out of here by the police, let's say by Oishi, if Oishi doesn't take us like a town over and to the airport, there's a good chance that we will be stabbed or something while we're out there, and no one's gonna know or do anything about it.
ここにいる限りは何もないとは思いますが、赤坂さんの気分的にめいらないかという方が問題ですね。
Oh, did not mean to skip that. So, I don't think anything will happen while you're here, but I'm more worried about your mental health. I had relaxed a bit now that things had progressed this far, but it was exactly as Oishi had said. When I realized that this was enemy territory, I suddenly felt uncomfortable. With leaving being the only thing left for me to do, the chance that I would come to harm was logically fairly low. But that didn't mean I was completely safe.
そうですね。横になっているだけなら、ホテルのベッドでも同じな気がします。
そうでしょう、そうでしょう。私もその方がいいと思います。
At that moment, I caught a glimpse of the clock over Oishi's shoulder. It was the evening. The hours when I could call Yuki at the hospital were almost over. I wanted to tell her as quickly as possible that I would soon be back to her side.
ちょっと、雪江の病院に電話してきます。ロビーに公衆電話とかはありませんか？
新婚さんはそういうの豆だな。確か会計の脇にあったと思います。ここで待ってますから、いってらっしゃい、いってらっしゃい。
Oishi, laughing while saying that he was jealous, opened up the window and pulled out a cigarette, even though he was in the hospital room. Appreciative at how considerate Oishi was, I set out to the lobby to find the phone. Imagine the phone is tapped or bugged, and you're able to just I don't know. Maybe the S group is able to look at all the call logs. They're able to see, hey, someone made a call to Tokyo from Hinamizawa, from the clinic to a specific room in a specific hospital in Tokyo. And then, overnight, someone flies to Tokyo, someone just so happens to also be a nurse or something. They're able to sneak into that hospital, and let's just say something happens to Yukie. The lobby was just a short distance down the hallway from the hospital room. I thought that this hospital was a bit too grand for a village like this, but of course it was nothing compared to the general hospital Yukie was admitted to. Running inside a hospital wasn't the best of manners, but calling hours would soon end, so I dashed over in a hurry. There was nobody else in the lobby. It may have been the evening, but there was nobody at the reception desk. Well, this might actually be lucky for me. I wasn't planning to have a conversation to feel guilty about it, but it would still be embarrassing to have someone listen to the conversation between me and Yukie. Taking a quick look around, I soon found the payphone. Digging around in my pockets, I grabbed a few coins. I was calling Tokyo from here, so I would burn through this amount fairly quickly. I picked up the receiver and inserted a coin, then dialed the number for Yukie's hospital, which I had completely memorized at this point. Okay, so it's a public payphone, never mind. I thought he was going to use, like, the phone that's literally on, you know, the receptionist's desk, or whatever. Or maybe this phone has been modified and it can still be tapped. I don't know. Number for Yukie's hospital had a lot of 8s and 9s, so dialing it in inevitably took some time. Normally, it wouldn't be a big deal, but currently any time was precious. However, I felt that something was strange as I was dialing in the number. I don't know exactly how to put it, but it's as if the receiver was being too quiet. That unique white noise from the telephone line wasn't there. Somehow, I felt that I wasn't getting any feedback from the phone, and without feeling a response, I hung up the receiver to try again. The coin popped out from the return slot. I reinserted the coin and began dialing once again, but the receiver was still dead silent.
なんだこれ。断線でもしてるのかな。
While I was wasting time like this, the amount I had to spend talking with Yukie shrunk. I began to feel needlessly impatient.
すみません。
I felt the presence of someone on the other side of the glass, so I called out. There was an immediate response, and a man who seemed like a pharmacist came over.
はいはい。どうなさいましたか？
Oh, wrong one. Okay, so this guy doesn't have a sprite. Just making sure.
すみません。この電話の調子がおかしくて。ちょっと見てもらえますか？
The man came over and tried testing various things with the receiver pressed to his ear. Come to think of it, this was someone who worked at the hospital, not someone from the phone company. Just as I didn't know much about phones, neither would he.
あれ？なんだこれ？
The man held up the cord that connected the phone to the wall. It was completely severed.
なんだこれ？参ったな。これじゃ電話会社の人に直してもらわないとどうにもならないですね。電話でしたら事務室のを使います？
I didn't want the people in the hospital office around while I was talking.
近所に公衆電話はありませんか？
Oh no.
ここを出て道なりに行くと商店街に出ます。そこのどこかの角のタバコ屋にあったような気がするな。行けば見つけられると思いますよ。
I was dressed in a hospital gown. I was wearing sandals on my feet. My head was wrapped in bandages. Just looking at me, you could tell that I was a hospital patient. No matter how you looked at it, I was not dressed to be wandering outside. But that's where the impetuousness of youth came in. Choosing the chance to talk to Yukie for even a little longer, I headed outside in my current state. Oh boy. Follow the road to the shopping district. Should be able to find one soon enough. With only those 2 lines as my guide, I ran outside the gate of the hospital. With the village nestled in the valley, when the sun set, it got dark quickly. The sparse street lights lit up enough to start attracting moths. The Higurashi, knowing the time for their chorus was soon at a close, redoubled their fragile cries. Finding the payphone wasn't as easy as the person at the hospital had suggested. Was it still up ahead? Did I miss it already? Was I just getting further away? Just as I was about to be crushed by a wave of uncertainty towering over me, I found a shop on the corner with cigarettes written on a small sign. My joy spurred me onwards. Just as I had heard at the hospital, set next to the counter of the cigarette shop was an antiquated payphone. I wasn't wearing a watch, so I didn't know what time it was. I probably didn't have much left, though. But it was enough. Just as long as I could tell Yuki my job was done, and I would be coming home soon. Picking up the receiver, I slid a coin down the slot. But I felt that something was strange, just like at the hospital. Even after inserting the coin, the phone showed no response. I hung up the receiver and tried putting in the coin one more time. But there was absolutely no response. This phone was dead. It couldn't be. Thinking that, I felt along the cord that protruded from the back of the phone. Doing that, my hands found the end of a completely severed line. What is this? Having now had the same thing happen twice, my bafflement was accompanied by a sense of unease. It seemed that the cord had been severed cleanly by a sharp blade of some sort. And I may be mistaken, but it didn't look like much time had passed since it was cut.
すみません。すみません。
Opening up the booth window of the tobacco shop, I looked for someone in the dimly lit interior. Eventually, there were the sounds of somebody plodding down some stairs, and an old lady appeared. The old lady's plodding and lethargic steps, for some reason, only served to make me more frantic.
タバコですかいね。
Does she have one? She does not have a portrait, which makes sense. She's just like a side character.
小さまでねんと、わがねのしゃ。
タバコを買いたいわけじゃないんです。この電話が。
Realizing saying the phone was broken and asking them to take a look at it was going to get me nowhere, I swallowed back my words.
この電話が壊れてるみたいなんで、別の公衆電話があるところを教えてもらいたいのですが。
The old lady moved her jaw up and down slowly as if chewing on the meaning of my words. It seemed that she wouldn't understand until she had digested things thoroughly.
電話、壊れてますかいね。そんな難儀だわ。他の公衆電話を当たってください。
The old lady directed me to another payphone that seemed quite a ways away. Her way of telling me was so long-winded that I inadvertently started to get impatient. At that moment, I spotted a clock in the dim interior of the store. The minute hand was just about to point straight up. Even if there was a phone right here that I could use, I would only be able to tell Yuki a good night with the time I had left. On top of that, my destination was a remote payphone, which I didn't know the exact distance to. If I was of a normal state of mind, deciding to give up on the phone today would have been the natural process, or natural thought process. But at that moment, I had become somewhat stubborn for some reason. So give me 1 second. Okay. Unable to use the phone in the hospital and coming out here and still being unable to use one, there was no mistaking that I had become quite insistent on using a phone.
どうもありがとうございます。その電話ボックス、探してみます。
Refusing to offer her to draw me a map, I left the tobacco shop. This is like so fucking annoying. Because this is like what Ryu is really like. He's really good at making these scenarios, right? He's very good at building up tension. Because just think of the situation, right? Like you just fought off 2 members from the Yakuza. You're public enemy number 1 in this village. You wake up in a hospital within the village. You try to call your wife from the phone and the phone line's been cut. You leave the hospital while it's dark out and you start wandering to a tobacco shop in hopes that you are able to find another payphone to use. That phone line has also been cut. What the fuck is gonna happen next? If I just followed this road straight down, I'd eventually find it. Sandals flapping as I ran, I couldn't help but laugh at myself. I'll admit that I was quite steadfast about calling Yukie, but there were days when I was tired or busy when I wouldn't call her. Even today, my entire body was covered in injuries, and I was dead tired. On top of that, there wasn't much time left. It wouldn't be strange at all if today was one of those days I didn't call her. But having twice been foiled trying to call her, had I become hot-headed about it? Was I like a dog who was being told to stay with a piece of food dangled in my face?
何やってんだろうな。
Even so, I somehow couldn't quell the uneasy feeling sitting in the pit of my stomach. It was like that with the hospital phone, and the same with the one at the tobacco shop. Both cords were definitely not severed from being frayed by long years of use. The clean cuts indicated that someone had taken something sharp and deliberately cut them. But who? And for what reason? Also, hey Billy, thanks a bunch for stopping by. I assume you sent it on Discord, and if you did, I'll check that later, and that'll be in preparation for the finale. Because when we get to the post-chapter discussion, there's going to be quite a few things that we're going to be talking about, and we're going to go into some secret stuff that we'll cover later. Anyway. How much had I run so far? The scenery around me was no longer that of a shopping district with residential buildings about the lonely road. Or scattered about the lonely road? Yes, scattered about the lonely road. The surroundings had already grown dark. I was blatantly out too far for a quick phone call, and it was quite obvious that I was far removed from the hospital. I recalled the clock I saw at the tobacco shop. It might almost be time. I had run for quite a bit, so my breathing had grown quite ragged. If I just wanted to hear Yuki's voice, I should have just thrown away my reservations and borrowed the phone at the office. I regretted it a little. Well then, was it about time to give up? Just when I thought that, I saw the light in front of me. I had finally found it. It was the phone booth. It seemed that the light in the phone booth had recently been changed as it shone with a vivid white light. Like a literal moth to a flame, huh? Like a literal fucking moth to a flame. Do remember, this background is also the background from Higurashi chapters 1 and 2, where Tomitake's body was found. Or at least this is the like part or the scenery where the cops were talking about, hey, a body was discovered nearby. So Anyway. Although in the gloom of Hinamizawa, it was nothing more than the gathering spot for moths. But in any case, I had finally found it. As my hand touched the door of the phone booth, I realized that I was breathing and sweating heavily. I didn't know what time it was right now, but even if it was just a moment, I might be able to get in touch with Yuki. Since I had spent all this effort getting here, turning back without even giving it a try was out of the question. Before I picked up the receiver, another wave of uneasiness washed over me. I was worried that this phone cord might be severed as well. Imagine it's rigged to an explosive. How was the cord in the phone booth? Squatting down, I followed the bundle of cables as they ran along the corner into the ceiling. At a glance, nothing was out of the ordinary. I ran my fingers as far as I could along the line to check it out. The only thing they found was a thick layer of dust. Nothing out of the ordinary. I wondered if it was popular in Hinamizawa to cut the cords of payphones as some sort of tasteless prank. It might be prudent to talk to Oishi-san about this later. Even if it was nothing more than a prank, it was still vandalism of public property. In any case, this one was fine. This time. Pulling out a coin from my pocket with one hand, I picked up the receiver with the other. But this time, before the receiver even reached my ear, I felt something was off. The receiver was light. It was more than a slightly unpleasant feeling. It felt almost sickening. What he means by this, by the way, I don't blame you if you're, a little too young for this, which, like, just saying that out loud makes me feel ancient, even though I'm not. But if you've never used, the reason why I say this is because payphones are no longer a thing. So just in case, if you don't know what a payphone is a phone that is available for public use. You would slot in a coin, or X amount of coins, and you could then dial someone, right? Just make a phone call. These would be all over the place. All over the United States, all over Canada, all over Mexico. I think in Mexico, there's still payphones, but they're not as common anymore. They've slowly been removed, or they're slowly being removed. I'm not sure how it's like in Asia, but I think in Japan there's still payphones. But in the U.S., for example, payphones are no longer a thing, really. So the phone itself, the receiver, was this like little black handle, right? I mean, I'm sure you know what a fucking like payphone handle looks like, but just in case. Let me put up a picture on the screen here. Give me a sec. Here we go. Like, just the most basic, like, payphone, right? They look like this. So this is what a payphone looks like, right? Which I'm sure you've seen. Even if you've never actually used one in your life, you've probably seen one in a movie or something. Anyway, the phone part, the black receiver, the thing that's hanging over the numbers that you press, that usually has a specific weight to it. It's relatively hefty because it needs to be able to not be blown by the wind, for example, or, you know, by other means. It needs to be relatively resilient. So what he's referring to here is that, like, it's almost as if the phone itself has been gutted for the most part, probably, which is crazy to think about. So that's something just to keep in the back of your mind. Anyway, back to this. To verify the source of my displeasure, I peered at the receiver in my hand with a measure of reluctance.
なんだよこれ。
The coiled cord that connected the receiver to the rest of the phone had been ripped apart, the tip of the cable swaying in the air. It was all I could do to restrain myself as as a raw and unpleasant feeling worked its way up the small of my back. It was a type of dread. At that moment, I heard the crunch of somebody stepping on gravel. The light was reflecting off the glass walls of the booth, leaving me unable to see outside into the darkness. Oh boy. I steeled myself and stepped out of the phone booth. The inside of the booth was lit with that strong light, which might have made it warmer in there. Just stepping outside, I could feel a chill wash over me. And there was the silhouette of a person. A small silhouette.
君は
Who do you think it is? The long hair of that silhouette was blown about by the cool breeze.
怪我人が病院を抜け出してはいけないのですよ。
Somewhere in my head, I knew who this girl was. I didn't have any basis for it, but I knew that she was that girl.
ねえ、赤坂。
I keep calling him Asakusa, I think. Asakusa, instead of Akasaka. Which is my bad. I've been misreading his name constantly. She, Erika Furude, said that almost like it was a warning.
君が電話のコードを。
Her expression remained unchanged, and my question was left unanswered. In other words, no response. Regardless, I felt that she had affirmed my suspicions.
どうしてこんなことをするんだ。どうして。
The last words had a tinge of anger behind it. I frantically tried to smooth things out, but she didn't seem very afraid.
もうどうにもならないことです。
I interpreted her words as meaning that I wasn't going to be in time for calling hours at the hospital. But thinking about it, that would have been a strange thing to say. Why would she know something like that? I could take what she had said to have any other meaning. She just stood there like a mannequin, not even moving an inch. Almost to the point that if the wind wasn't occasionally rustling through her long hair, there would be the illusion that time had stopped.
赤坂が私を気味悪く思っているのがよくわかる。
ああ、いや、そんなことないよ。
My denial came out almost like a bad piece composed for a poetry slam. But her words were right on the mark. I had always felt something ominous and uncanny about her. Ever since her strange threats at the shrine. Here she is, smug as fuck. She looks like a gremlin. Now, mind you, this creature is not Rika. This thing right in front of us is not Rika. And I wonder how people get through this game with this art style. I truly do not understand it, because She just looks so out of place. This looks a lot more menacing. Anyway, she had noticed that my expression was contrary to my words, seemingly laughing at the gap between them.
赤坂の怖がり。
怖がってなんかいないよ。
Being laughed at by the small child didn't sit well with me. So I said that.
もう電話を探しても手遅れの時間です。
Now that we're back to this expression, the reason why I brought that up is because here you can see Rika, right? If you look at her expression, it looks like she's pitying you, right? Like she pities you. She's like, ah, you poor thing. Look at you. It's like you're writhing in pain and nothing can be done about it. This console version of Rika, she looks like, she's judging you. She just looks like a gremlin. And then you have this. This looks like a girl that's trying to fend off like an attacker, and she has her back against the wall. Like, this does not look like a portrait that would match the words that Rika is saying right now. Even if you find another phone, it's too late. Like, here she just looks like she's scolding you. Here, she just looks disappointed in you. Oh, you pitiable creature. Nothing can be done now that the wheels have been set in motion. Anyway.
そうだな。
She didn't even have to say it. I was absolutely too late. I might have already missed calling hours even by the time I reached this phone booth. I was too late. I had no option but to give up for today. Once I decided that, my unhealthy obsession with phones suddenly faded. Even I thought that it was strange that I was that obsessed. That strange obsession now gone, I began to laugh at how hopeless I was. I mean, just look at what I was wearing. It wasn't normal. A hospital gown and sandals, my head wrapped in bandages, my body completely soaked in sweat. It was a wonder that the old lady at the tobacco shop wasn't surprised to see me. With wanting to hear Yukia's voice as my motive, I traipsed around the town the entire evening. I didn't know whether to call it the follies of youth or simply plain embarrassing. In any case, it was all I could do but to laugh at myself.
もうこれで今夜赤坂がすることは何もないです。
そうだな。もう何もないよ。おとなしく病院へ引き上げるさ。
それがいいのですよ。病院への道はわかりますですか？
わかるつもりだよ。
She waved her little hand as I began to head back the way I came. She began to follow alongside me. Looking at her face, I could see that she wore a mischievous smile, as if she was extremely interested in whether or not I would get lost.
リカちゃんの家もこっちの方向なのかい？
なのですよ。
こんな時間に一人で表を歩いてると、ご両親に怒られたりしないかい？
Let's see, does she have the smile in this? No. Okay. I thought maybe they gave her the gremlin smile from a bit ago.
別に怒られませんです。
I mean, here she kind of has it. Or the gremlin stare. Or gremlin glare.
今日はご両親は忙しい日なので、僕のことなど忘れていますですよ。
それでも帰った方がいい。きっと怒るよ。
それでも赤坂とおしゃべりする方が面白いのでいいのです。
She said that with a face free from worry as she looked up at me once more and smiled. When she showed me that smile, the eerie feeling surrounding her faded. But even then, she was still as mysterious to me as ever. We arrived at the corner I had turned at earlier, but it was much darker than before, and with the point of view changed on the return trip, I wasn't very confident that this was actually the corner I turned at. There was no mistake. It had to be this corner. As I began to move my feet again, the girl grabbed onto my clothes.
赤坂は病院へ戻るのではないのですか？
もちろん戻るつもりだよ。道間違えた？
A short moment of silence. Eventually, still holding onto my clothes, she began to walk. It was the beginning of the walk to the hospital this mysterious girl would take me on. We're already at the halfway mark, and it's been like, I think, maybe 30 or 40 minutes.
電話のコードを切って回ってたのリカちゃんだろ。ダメだよ、もうしちゃ。
僕には何のことかよくわかりませんのですよ。
本当にかい？
She tried to play dumb, but it was written all over her face.
ニパー。
It was obvious she was trying to laugh it off, but that adorable smile of hers just made me want to forgive her. I'm gonna be a horrible father, aren't I? That momentary lapse in tension was erased by her next words.
孫、無事に見つかってよかったです。
Unable to respond right away, I sunk into silence. I had already learned this from Sato-san's info, didn't I? This girl, no, this entire village, knew everything since the moment I set foot in it. I considered playing dumb, but in the end I chose not to. With everything being known already, there was no point in me feigning ignorance.
なんとかね。
それはよかったです。これで東京に帰れますですよ。
ありがと
赤坂の怪我はひどいのですか？
う。さあ、ひどいのかどうか、医者の診察を聞いてないからわからないな。
Huh? Come to think of it, I vaguely remember being told to lie down and take it easy for at least 24 hours. Did that mean bed rest?
怪我人は病院を抜け出してはいけないのですよ。
電話のコードだって切っちゃいけないんだぞ。
みー。僕には何のことやらわからないのです。
じゃあこっちだって何のことかわからないや。
As we played dumb with each other, we both laughed at the same time. If somebody saw us laughing at each other like this, it would probably bring a smile to their lips.
赤坂が生きてこの村を出られる確率は決して僕は赤坂に死んでほしくはないので生きて村を出ることができて嬉しいです。
リカちゃん、最初っから私の正体は知ってたんだろ？
She said nothing but gave a firm nod.
なら分かっていると思うけど、私たちはこの村のどちらかというと敵の部類に入ると思う。なのに君はいろいろと忠告してくれたね。
That's right. She said it at that time. She wouldn't warn somebody that she was okay with dying. She definitely said something like
な
that.
ら私は君に感謝するべきなのかもしれないね。
感謝した方がいいのですよ。僕は命の恩人なのです。
Saying that, she puffed up her chest proudly. She said it jokingly, but the meaning behind those words was quite heavy. That was because, whether I lived or died, was a decision that might have been made in a place unbeknownst to me. She said those words with such an adorable smile that it took a few moments of silence for their weight to settle in. I'd been to this place before. The Guardian's office was in there. It was the stone steps leading up to the foot of the shrine. When I passed by before, I was so focused on finding a phone booth that I hadn't realized where I was.
確かこの神社がリカちゃんの家だったよね。
まあ、そんなものです。
Looking up at the shrine grounds, it was brightly lit and energetic voices could be heard. What was going on?
今日はお祭りの日なのですよ。
Oh. There's a festival today.
お祭り？
お祭りです。
ひなみ沢村の唯一で一番のお祭り。綿流しのお祭りです。
綿流し？
祭りなんて名ばかりのつまらないものですよ。見ますですか？
She asked bluntly, but seeing that I looked interested, she climbed up a couple of steps and motioned for me to come. I was only going to go back and sleep anyways. If I had nothing else to do, it might not be a bad idea to go with her on a little detour. Oh, Akasaka-san. In the hostile territory that was this village, I didn't know what would happen if I ventured down a side road without Oishi. Even though I thought of the village like that, when I was with this girl, I forgot all about it. In any case, even without anything to back it up, I felt that as long as I was with her, none of the ill will from the village would befall me. That's why, even though I knew my cover was blown, I strangely had no qualms about setting foot into the heart of the Onigafchi Guardian's territory. Climbing up to the grounds of the shrine, I could see there were about 3 pavilions set up with meeting tables and folding chairs. The old folks from the village, no, the executives of the Guardians, were already quite drunkenly sharing another round of drinks. I could only see it as people from the village council drinking while enjoying the evening air. At the very least, it was certainly quite different from any festival that I'd ever seen.
ね。つまんないお祭りでしょ。
これは確かにお祭りには見えないね。
大昔からずっと続いてきたお祭りですが、見ての通り、すっかり寂れてしまったのですよ。
As if to chide the old expression, he said that while looking at them with an exasperated expression. You really couldn't call this a festival anymore. It was just a bunch of neighbors getting together to drink under the guise of a festival.
これじゃ祀られる神様も気の毒だな。
こんなみっともないお祭りも、5、6年もすると村中が総出でやってきて、ちゃんと儀式も真面目にやる立派なお祭りになるのですよ。
Huh? Give the sorry excuse for a festival 5 or 6 more years, then everybody in the village will start coming. The ceremony will also be done properly, and it'll be a respectable festival again. That's quite the ominous line. Because remember, the daughters of the Furude family are meant to be some sort of, I think they said, reincarnation of the guardian deity Oyashiro-sama, and they enforce his will. And here she is saying all this stuff. In 5 or 6 more years, when the first chapter of Higurashi takes place, everyone in the village will start coming to this festival, and it will be respectable once again. What she said was not so much wishful thinking as if it was the telling of a future that had already been determined. She wasn't even predicting it. It was almost like she was simply reporting the results. That's how it sounded. Even though it was baseless speculation, the way she said it wouldn't let me interject. It was the same way she talked when she changed. While I struggled to find the words to reply to her, she wandered over to the other side of the grounds, not minding me at all. Not in a state where I could afford to be left behind, I hurriedly followed after her. Passing through a copse of pine trees, a strong and cool breeze ruffled my hair. There, from that one evening, was the splendid observation platform the girl had shown me. And here it is again. As it had grown completely dark, the modest lights littered across the nightscape were providing a different type of scenery.
こうして眺めると、この村ものどかそうに見えますのです。
She said that with an indifferent look on her face.
君は先日、この村は絶対にダムに沈むことはないと、そう断言したね。
She didn't reply, seemingly relishing in the feeling of the wind blowing through her hair.
あれは あの時点でもう大臣が要求に応じていたという意味だったんだね。
She spun around, her gaze meeting mine, but she said nothing. She spoke nothing that would neither confirm nor deny what I had just said.
多分今回の事件は闇から闇へ葬られる。本庁上層部は多分大臣のスキャンダルが公になってトラブルになることを望まないと思う。
さもないと孫を殺すぞと脅したに違いないのです。
で、大臣との交渉が成功し、孫は解放された。
孫を助けたのは赤坂ですよ。
どうだろう。発端となったあの財布の発見。あれ自体がすでに出来すぎだったように思う。
Ever since the moment the wallet was discovered, I felt something was odd. Oishi said it as well. That the Sonozaki family had given the order to release the hostage. Meaning that our little manhunt was a farce to begin with. Come to think of it, I was punched, kicked, and had a gun pointed at me. I felt like they put up quite a fight, but that might have been all a part of a good performance. Once the negotiations were successful, they couldn't just say, "Here you go," and return the minister's grandson right to his doorstep. Right. They knew that the public safety had realized that this was a kidnapping case and were moving in on it. That's why, due to the actions of the public safety, the grandson was able to be rescued safely. So the minister didn't give in to any unreasonable demands. That type of performance was necessary.
僕
Interesting.
には難しいことはよくわかりません。
That's a very interesting take, because that could be... I didn't even consider that. Where, you know, they have to release him, but they're not just gonna, like, plop him out in the middle of Tokyo, right? Huh.
同感だな。私にだって難しいことはよくわからない。だが、一つ確実なことがある。君が言った通りってことさ。この村はダム湖になんか沈まない。ダム計画なんてそのうちなくなってしまうってことさ。
That wasn't something an officer of the law should be saying, but I naturally let those words slip from my mouth. This village may have stirred up all sorts of trouble, but that was because they were protecting their homes. If someone just decided by themselves that I had to leave the house I used to live in, I would resent them all as well. On top of that, it wasn't a place like mine where I just happened to be renting it, but a place that their families had lived for generations. It might be ignorant to call their desperate resistance an overreaction. I might not really be qualified to criticize politics or bureaucracy. But deliberately building a dam on land that was loved by its residents wasn't something I could get behind.
でも、よかったじゃないか。
どうしてですか？
And then here we have a full CG render, or well, just a full art piece of Rika.
少なくともこれで、この村に平和が戻るよ。
Even though the minister promised to use his considerable influence to cancel the project, it would probably take more than a few months before it would be completely scrapped. At the very least, it would probably take 1 or 2 years. For the villagers to officially hear that the village wasn't going to be submerged at the bottom of a dam was still a ways away. But it was no mistake that the promise of peace returning to the village was there. It turned out from the beginning to end that it had already all been decided. Just as the girl had said, it was decided. There wasn't really a need for me to come here in the first place. There was absolutely no need for me to have come here an aggravated and unpleasant situation. If I had never come here, then The grandson's release might have been done in a more amicable manner.
平和がこの村に
When I nodded, she laughed as if to admonish me, but her face remained indifferent, expressionless. And then, her eyes narrowed slightly as she snickered.
これから毎年血生臭いことが起きるのに
リカちゃん、何の話だい？
As the wind blew her hair about, the girl, as if taking pleasure, and that I was the only one who didn't know, continued to snicker as she looked at my face for a while.
私ね、あと何年かすると殺されるの。
Huh? Backlit by the moon, it was hard to tell if her expression that had been cast in the shadow was smiling, amused, or resigned.
リカちゃんがどうして？
とても不愉快なことだけど、それも多分決まってることなの。
決まっているって誰がそんなことを決めるんだい？
それを私も知りたいの。
Turning back to face me, she showed me a resolute expression for the first time. And after staring into my eyes for a moment, she turned back to gaze at the scenery before she spoke her next words.
ここは人の命を何とも思わない連中でいっぱいです。これを伝えても何も変わらないかもしれないけど、でも死という月を映す水面をかき消すためなら小石を投じることもあるかもしれない。
No idea what she was trying to say. Oh boy. It's just, I had to listen to every word with my body and soul. Or at least, that's what I thought.
来年の今日、そう、昭和54年の6月の今日、ダム現場の監督が殺されます。
I was about to say that. That's when the foreman gets killed. For a moment, I couldn't comprehend what she was talking about. By the foreman, did she mean that gruff old man I played mahjong with?
殺されるってどうして？
She didn't answer. But she had the same expression on her face that she did when she declared that the dam project would go away. That wasn't the face of somebody making a forecast or a prediction. It was something that was already decided. No, it was as if she was already reporting the results. That sort of expression.
恐ろしい殺され方をした後、体中をバラバラに引き裂かれて捨てられてしまいます。
バラバラ殺人。
その翌年の昭和55年の6月の今日、聡子の両親が突き落とされて死にます。
Satoko? It was the first time I'd heard that name, but I didn't have the courage to interrupt the girl's story.
あるいは事故、不幸な事故。
The girl smiled faintly, but she wasn't exactly encouraging me to smile along with the lifeless look in her eyes.
そしてさらにその翌年の昭和56年の6月の今日、私の両親が殺されます。そしてさらに翌年の昭和57年の6月の今日、聡子の意地悪おばが頭を割られて死にます。そしてさらに翌年の昭和58年の6月の今日、あるいはその数日後か、私が殺されます。すべての死が予定調和なら、最後の死も また予定のうちなのでしょうか。でも、ならばこれは一体誰の予定なの？
This village is full of murderers and people who have no regard for human life. It would be fine to believe that all the deaths up until 1982 would be the work of somebody in the village. It would be fine to believe that all the deaths that would occur were at the discretion of those who control the village. But that didn't explain what would happen in 1983. There was no way that the last death would fit in anybody's plans. They had no regard for human life. They would use every means at their disposal to meet their goals. But their goals were at odds with the last death. That's why the last death was unrelated to them. But that last death would definitely, most likely, probably, without question, happen. Probably, definitely, I dare say. The last death would be a merciful one. A handkerchief or something being placed over their mouth, making them lose consciousness never to wake up again. Exactly whose plan was that?
私は幸せに生きたい。望みはそれだけ。大好きな友人たちに囲まれて、楽しく日々を過ごしたい。それだけなの。それ以上の何も望んでいないの。
リカちゃん。
死にたくない。
The girl, stoic as ever, let those last words slip in the end. Eventually, we were discovered by some drunks. The girl, as well as I, were dragged back to the festivities. Everybody was completely drunk, so even when they saw my head completely wrapped in bandages, they wouldn't let me leave. Well, certainly, if I was in good enough condition to slip out of the hospital. It must not be that serious. The girl was mingling with everybody, being pampered like a kitten. Her expression was adorable, like nothing like the one from just before, predicting her own death and whispering that she didn't want to die. Having said that, having a silly and lively conversation like this, it was hard to believe that these people were the core of an extremist resistance group. Oh my god. Even if it was a shell of its former self, it was a festival where people in the village gathered, so the 20-some-odd folk here should have included some of the village executives and other important members. Among those, there was no doubt that there were members that were at the Sonozuki family council in attendance. Meaning, if we never met face to face before, there were people here who knew my identity. In a small village like this, they knew the faces of all the villagers that lived here. That's why, without even saying anything, it soon became obvious that I was an outsider. But they actually seemed interested by that, asking me all sorts of questions about Tokyo, drinking while musing on the faint relationship the city and the village. Musing on the faint relationship the city had with the villagers and empathizing with a rather meager environment. The confidential talks with the minister were finished. His grandson was in police custody. Everything was over. I might not have to be put in another perilous situation. To me, they were only my adversaries because of my job. Outside of that, there was no reason I couldn't be friendly with them. The next time I visited this village, would it return to being a tranquil and beautiful place? If that happened, I might be able to take a relaxed walk around the village with her again. My cup was once again filled to the brim with beer. By the time I was able to get away, it was the middle of the night. The girl had at some point disappeared. It seems that her parents had told her to go home and sleep when she let out a large yawn. The old folks, who had absolutely no remorse for making an injured person hanging out with them, told me as much as they laughed. I was just here drinking, so I thought to help a bit with the cleanup. However, my help was refused on the grounds that I was a guest. On top of that, they had a cart prepared to take me back to the hospital. Oh no. Losing the battle against my sleepiness inside the car, I was sound asleep until we reached the parking lot of the hospital. Okay. The front door of the hospital was naturally locked at this hour. I wandered around bewilderedly, searching for a back entrance until somebody on night duty found out and let me inside.
こんな時間までどちらへ？入江先生も心配してましたよ。
ご迷惑をおかけしました。神社でお祭りの人たちに引き止められまして。
ああ、そういえば今日は神社で町会の人たちが集まって飲むとか言ってたな。それはご愁傷様でした。傷は大丈夫ですか？
Condolences.
ちょっとズキズキしますね。多分アルコールのせいだと思います。
そうだ。お連れの刑事さんが連絡が欲しいと言ってましたよ。
いけない。大石さんを待たせてたんだった。
I glanced at the clock. No matter how you looked at it, it was way too late to call him now. I'll apologize to him tomorrow over the phone. I returned back to my hospital room and slipped into the bed that was still unmade from the time I went outside. I don't think we've seen this background before though. This one is new to my knowledge. So here's the, the classic one. And here's the console version of it. Interesting. Oh, that's no good. I have to turn off the lights. But my wariness had cut the cord. But my wariness had cut the cord powering my body, lulling me into a deep sleep. Okay. Well, that was a relatively short chapter. Let's go ahead and view the new tips real quick. So, a mother's diary 1, 2, and 3. There was something I didn't like about my child. I first realized that when I started writing these things down. They never warn you about it in any books about raising children, but they aren't just a plaything. If they aren't able to feel loved even when they are doing exactly as their parents want them to, then those parents are failures. This wasn't something like that though. How can I say it? It's probably harder to express with mere words. I just want my child to be average. As long as they weren't falling behind, there wasn't any need for them to excel at something. As long as they acted appropriately for their age, I would have been fine with it. But my child had been different ever since kindergarten. While the children in her class were running around in excitement about the field trip the next day, she only wore a bored look on her face, aloof and distant. When the other kids broke the equipment for the athletics festival and were apologizing fervently, she only wore a bored look on her face, aloof and distant. When the teacher was reading a fun picture book, only she wasn't smiling. Even if they all got to eat a delicious bento, only she wasn't happy. If it was only this, it would still be in the realm of understanding. However, what I don't understand about my child is that if the aforementioned situations happen again, they'd now act in a manner befitting their age. I don't understand the principle behind that as a parent. Why were they indifferent about that field trip, but happy about this one? Why were they indifferent about that picture book, but happy about this one? Why were they indifferent about that bento, but happy about this one? The former and the latter in each situation seemed exactly the same to me. There was even times I thought the former one was better. I don't understand that child's feelings. During parent-teacher meetings, the teacher always says the same thing. And I would always respond that I don't understand my own child, and we would mope together. My husband, always the optimist, once said that a young child's feelings are different from an adult's, so if there were some things we didn't understand, we shouldn't worry about it. I lament his lack of urgency. One day, when I was in a good mood, I took the effort to prepare a menu that my child would enjoy. But she only smiled with a vague expression of disinterest. That attitude frankly made me angry, so I hit her on the head. On a day when the weather was nice, the laundry I had just hung up to dry was blown by a large gust of wind, causing the entire line to fall. But she, watching me trying to pick up the laundry in a panic, stood there laughing. That attitude frankly made me angry, so I hit her on the head. I think the same sort of thing happened countless times. Before I knew it, my child was only able to look at me with an indifferent expression on her face. I regret the fact that I'd been a bad mother. Thinking I should regain her trust, I thought I'd get it back little by little with some light interactions. Seeing her do some sort of craft work on the veranda, I called out to
こ
her.
こ数日気持ちのいい晴れの日が続いて気分がいいわね。
Whose voice was that? Whose voice was that? Was it the blonde chick from chapter 1 and 2? I forget her name. The chick that's obsessed with the Hinamizawa lore. The one who always hung out with Tomidake. Takano. Is it Takano? I mean, it hasn't been established that she's a mother. So I don't know. But anyway. That child with that indifferent look on her face, that child with that indifferent look on her face that I hated so much looked up at me for a moment, then without a word returned to immersing herself in her craft work. Up until now, I would have hit her on the head just for that. I held myself back.
何を作ってるの？お人形さん？てるてる坊主。
That's Satoko. I think that's Satoko's voice. That child was using inserts from the newspaper to deftly make some weather charms. Teru teru bozus, or teru teru? Or tere tere. I forget. They're like little ghosts that you hang outside your windows, and I believe they, it was either you hang them out because you wish for it to rain, or you wish for it not to rain. It was one of those two, and I can't remember off the top of my head. The forecast hadn't called for rain, but that child in her own way was praying that these sunny days would continue. Okay, yeah, it's to ward off the rain. Being able to understand my own child for the first time in a while, I couldn't hide my own happiness. Bringing out a ball of yarn, I began to hang my child's cute weather charms from the eaves of the house.
ダメよリカ。
Rika, not Satoko.
頭が重すぎるから。ほら、逆さてるてる坊主になっちゃったわ。これじゃ晴れじゃなくて雨になっちゃうわよ。
When I started to take them down, my child tugged at the hem of my shirt as if to stop me.
逆さになるように作ったのだから、それでいいの。
Oh yeah, that's definitely Rika's voice. I don't know why I thought Satoko.
でもリカ、てるてる坊主が逆さじゃ、晴れのおまじないにならないわよ。雨が降るようにおまじないをしているから、それでいいの。
I desperately suppressed the emotions welling up inside of me. I was desperately trying to understand my child.
そっか。お庭の朝顔が晴れ続きで元気がなくなっちゃったから、雨が欲しいのね。
That child turned to me with the expression that I hated the most.
晴れにね。飽きたの。
I don't understand. I don't understand. I just can't understand that child. So the journal entries that we were reading about someone being bored about a clear day was, well, Rika. Of her being like, I don't like clear days, and so on and so forth. Interesting. I mean, it was kind of obvious, I guess, assuming if you just go off by like the portrait that they used for this chapter, if you go off like the only Higurashi character that we've encountered from the main cast, you know, from the main children being Rika, I guess it makes sense. So, A Mother's Diary 2. During the family council, she buried herself under Orio's futon again. Orio-san doted on her unwaveringly. No matter whatever insolence my child commits, she doesn't mind. It's almost as though my child is a kitten or something. Orio dotes on her exactly like you would with a kitten. As her mother, I chided her for doing that. Until Orio-san had said 3 times that it was fine, I chided her as a formality. Of course, she never lends an ear to any of my chidings. Knowing that Orio-san's standing was far above mine, she behaves like that. I don't like the cunning that's unbefitting of her age either. In any case, not only Oryu-san but the rest of the old folk in the village spoil her too much. One day, I was surprised. By chance, on the way back from some shopping, I saw her by herself just outside of a candy shop. My own child suddenly grabbed a snack, opened the package right there, and then started eating it. She didn't make any attempts to pay for it, and she didn't even think of looking around. It didn't even feel like she was shoplifting, more like she was brazenly eating snacks that were offered to her. When I began to admonish my child, the elderly shop owner appeared and covered for her. The owner gave the ridiculous excuse that she had said it was okay for that child to eat any of the snacks out by the entrance, so it was fine. When I tried to pay for the snacks that my child had eaten, the owner refused my money. During that exchange, more old folks had suddenly gathered around, and it began to feel like I was the one in the wrong. The elderly people all put their hands together reverently in front of my child and repeatedly voiced their respects. I was born into the Furude family, so it wasn't like I didn't know why she was being treated specially. When I was still young, it was something I heard often from my grandmother. If by chance the child that I give birth to was a girl, that child would be the living incarnation of Oyashiro-sama. All the older folk believe she's the living incarnation of Oyashiro-sama and spoil her rotten. And not only did they spoil her, but they even told her she was the living incarnation of Oyashiro-sama. That she had a divine power and threw all sorts of strange folk tales her way. So she may have begun to believe herself that she was a special existence. I went around and told everybody that it wasn't good for her upbringing, so to stop telling her all these strange things. But there was no uprooting the elderly people's deep-seated superstitions. I told my child not to listen to them, but it ended up being that she stopped listening to me. Between the old folks in the village, who would dote on her, and myself, who only scolded her, there was no wonder who she would listen to. There was no mistaking that the reason she had become strange was because of the elderly villagers. There was no doubt that they had shoved her full of strange folktales and superstitions since she was young. If it wasn't for that, there was no doubt my child would have been cute and normal. Interesting. Because I think most people would agree that Rika is cute, or that they find her cute, but that's a very interesting chapter, or sorry, tip. Specifically because of, like, we normally don't know much about Rika's mom. We just know that she died, right? And I mean, I'm trying to, like, think of all this at once. It's like, well, why doesn't she believe Rika is like the reincarnation of Oyashiro-sama? Does she not believe her own family superstitions? She is technically part of the Furude family. Is she so far removed from, like, the traditions of the village or of the family that she doesn't believe any of this stuff? Is she just prude, or could it be because she hates Rika that she's unable to think that this is any, like, that there's any possibility of any of this being true? I'm not sure. But it's quite interesting. It's really, really, really interesting. Alright, let's move on to the final one, which is Mother's Diary 3. One sunny parent-teacher day, there was a cooking class and my child was making curry rice with a practiced hand. While the other children her age were awkwardly using their kitchen knives, that child was wielding hers deftly. The teacher approached me with a smile on her face, saying it must be the result of learning it at home. I managed to play it off with a vague smile and a nod in response. That was because I had never once taught my child how to make curry rice. Even then, she was peeling vegetables with a practiced hand, adding them into the pot in the order of which took longer to cook. For a normal parent, they might unintentionally clap their hands together, happy at their child's actions. But in my case, it was different. There was no mistaking that somebody had taught her how to make that curry rice when I wasn't taking care of her. Thinking that, I quietly fell into an unpleasant mood. When I asked, it seemed she could also sew and do the laundry. I had never taught her how to do those, and again, never saw her do it around the house, be it cooking or sewing or the laundry. Again, that was probably because the elderly villagers taught her all sorts of rubbish when I wasn't looking. And not only that, they probably taught her all sorts of strange superstitions, trying to prop her up as the living incarnation of Oyashiro-sama. I said as much to my husband, suggesting that we should keep our child away from the elderly folk. But my husband, who was in the position of being the head priest of the Furude shrine, had little power against the elderly who supported it. He took the rather uncommitted stance of saying that as long as she was being doted upon, wasn't it fine? I argued against that she was our child. That she was our child and should be a completely normal girl. That was what the elderly were expecting. That she was the living incarnation of Oyashiro-sama was simply odd. The elderly villagers believed that the child had divine powers. We would discuss the weather for the following day, but there were many times when I left the house without an umbrella and came back soaking wet. Rather than having clairvoyance, that was just secondhand knowledge from her watching the news all the time. The things that she knew that she shouldn't have known were just the result of the people who were trying to indoctrinate her and the people who were gossiping getting together in the village. However, there certainly were days where everybody thought it was going to be sunny all day and that child would stubbornly not go out without an umbrella. It would occasionally rain, and in the end, we would be saved. There might have also been times where Erika knew of major accidents in foreign countries faster than the news did. I thought that she must have heard it break over the radio or something, knowing things she shouldn't have. Something like that was in front of me right now, wasn't it? And that child was making curry rice when there shouldn't have been anybody who taught her how to. No, that couldn't possibly be the case. Somebody had taught her, indoctrinated her. When I wasn't taking care of her, somebody had indoctrinated Erika with something.
フルデさんのカレーは大変見事です。先生、花丸をあげちゃいます。ニパー。フルデさんはお料理を誰に習いましたか？やっぱりお家で？はい、お家なのですよ。
The other parents in attendance were impressed. Lies. All lies. I didn't teach her anything. Who was it? Who was the person who had completely indoctrinated my child? She was my normal, average daughter, not the living incarnation of Oyashiro-sama. Oh boy.